It also fixes a couple of other issues with the test versions. One issue was the PS4 and PS5 SK spoofing. So this will now spoof the SK version of the PS for 299.9, which is basically for when you're installing fake packages and trying to run them. If the SK version that the game requires is higher than the version your PS, what it will end up doing is giving you an update telling you to update your firmware when you go to launch the game. And it will not allow the game to launch. So that's now been patched. So that you will no longer get that message when running your games. Not only that, it does the same thing with the PS5 version, which is for when you're running your disc PS5 games. So that you also do not get that update which could cause you to accidentally update your firmware. For instance. So that's now been added into this version of Kstuff as well. So you'll no longer have that issue. It did require a separate spoofing payload previously, but that is no longer required with this version. Although with ETA Hen, there is a test build of ETA Hen at the moment. I think some of the older versions of Kstuff will probably get updated. But if you're still using that version, there was actually a plugin version of the spoofer that was added to spoof your PS4 STK version to 99.9. So you can add that plug-in with ETA Hen if you are using that version on your 5.x firmware right now. But ETA Hen has not had an official release yet to include 5.x only test versions at the moment. So another issue that's been resolved in this new Kstuff build, 5.x again. There was an issue sending the Kstuff payloads using traditional payload like injectors GUI to the point where I actually went ahead and created a new payload There's an injector. Android version and a Windows version that you can use. So you can use that one to send those older Kstuff payloads. If you're still using those, this new version that Echo Stretch has just released be able to be sent using older payload injectors too. As always, I would recommend just waiting to get properly added to the main exploit host so that you can just load them from there. Same with ETA Hen, just wait for everything to be complete. That is the easiest thing to do. But if you want to be able to load it right now on your 5.x, I'll show you how to do that real quick because it's recommended to use Spectre's host because it has an updated version of that can be used to run this version of Kstuff. The other exploit hosts that are still using the older will not be able to load this. So at the moment, you should use S7in1.site, which you can load from, of course, the user guide if you have Nomadix DNS and then from there, you can make sure you're on the Omtex option. And from there, you can load Spectre's host. So Spectre's host is pretty bare bones. It just runs the ELF loader, but it's the newer version of the ELF loader that you can use to then send this Kstuff payload, which you can send using your normal payload I'm just using the new one here from Alazif to inject the payload. And once it's loaded, I can then run my PS for fake packages. So moving on from 5.x, what about 6.x and 7.x firmwares getting access to Kstuff? There's been a pretty big development and that is the release of a new ELF loader. That works using the Blu-ray drive version of the exploit. That can be loaded using Hammer 83's jar loader. So this is actually a pretty big deal. So far, we've not had an ELF loader that can be using this version of the exploit instead. We had to use the Lua exploit in order to load the ELF loader. And there weren't that many testers available who actually had a Lua version of the exploit. And we're on a 6.x or 7.x firmware that they could use to test. So therefore, the amount of testers available was pretty limited. But that is not the case anymore because now there has been a proper release from Acryonym. So Cryonym's released this new jar file ELF loader, and you can use the Blu-ray drive exploit now to load that ELF loader. We were only able to do FTP and debug settings and kernel for the most part. A couple of things here and there with the Blu-ray drive exploit. But with the ELF loader, it will then allow proper payloads to be loaded using the Blu-ray drive exploit eventually, of course, and ETA Hen eventually. So that is a pretty big deal. For all of those people who have the Blu-ray drive version of the exploit, you pretty much have everything you need now to load Kstuff once it becomes available. So in order to load this, you need to burn the ISO for Hammer 83's jar loader onto a disk. I recommend using the full version. You can just go ahead and burn that over to a disk using image Once you have it burnt to a simply disk, pop it in your PS5 and then go over to the right-hand menu for the payloads that are on the disk and scroll down until you find the UMTX and select that to run the kernel exploit. Once that runs to completion, you can press X to return back to the menu, and you should have the green in the top left-hand corner where it says that the kernel red is available. That's what you want to see there. And at that point, you can then go over to the left option for the remote jar loader, and then we can use this to send this jar file for the ELF loader over. Now, I expect this will get integrated into the actual menu at some point in the near future. But for now, you can just send it over the network. So you can use something like NetGUI GUI or any other payload injector here to send the jar drag file it into the program. Enter your PS5's IP address and the port number is 9. And then when you inject the payload, it should run the ELF loader on your console. It will also enable the debug settings as well that you can install package files. So once we have that we can then follow up with sending any other additional like payloads, like the FTP payload or web server payload. Although these need to be the newer versions that work with the updated ELF loader. So it shouldn't be understated how important now that we actually have a working ELF using loader. The Blu-ray drive version of the exploit will allow for a lot more testers on these firmwares for testing and getting support for 6.x and 7.x. So the fact that the Blu-ray drive is now kind of on the same page in terms of functionality as the Lua version of the exploit is fantastic, so that's what we want to see. So that everybody can take advantage of Kstuff and ETA Hen once they become available for those Another firmwares. Couple of things to mention. We also got the release of a new avatar changer from Lappy for the PS5. This was also released on PS for a couple of weeks ago, but it's now also available here on the PS5. So you can use this to change your avatar. You can basically add different avatar images to the data folder and the avatars folder using FTP, and then of course there's also a bunch of pre-made ones that you can select as well if you don't want to do that. So you can just open up the avatar changer and then select the avatar that you want to apply to your profile. Then I think you just hold down L2 and press X to apply and it will apply it to that account. On top of that, you can also, I believe, press options and then you can press square and you can delete any avatars that you're not wanting to use. And also in the options menu, have the ability to press triangle, which will then allow you to change your profile name. So if you want to change your account you can also do it from the avatar changer. And in addition to that, it looks like FPKGI is being ported currently to PS5. It's not in a working state yet, and there's no official release. But the developer has been creating new test builds specifically targeting the PlayStation 5. So that's its jokers, hopefully. We might see a FPKGI version come to the PS5 sometime in the near future. As well, we're also seeing a lot of progress with 6.x and 7.x with some of the payloads actually. You know, getting to the point where they're running. Not kernel panicking immediately, but when trying to run like a PS4 game, there's an error or it crashes, so there are still some issues. But it looks like we are getting pretty close to 6.x and 7.x support with Kstuff as well. So a lot of exciting stuff coming. So hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe.